Hi, Sharon.
Hi. You.
Okay, well, welcome to the virtual Marxist Library. My name is Gene Rule, and I'm a member of the working group that puts together these programs. And a few words about the Institute for the Critical Study of Society. Most of you know, but we were formed about 10 or 15 years ago to further the library's goals of preserving our written heritage, as well as supporting emerging struggles for racial and gender solidarity and for socialism. The members of ICSS are active in different aspects of people's struggles. Some of us are affiliated with specific tendencies and political parties, others are not. We respect each other most of the time, but we do not necessarily agree on all issues. Accordingly, the opinions expressed in our workshops and lectures are those of the authors only and do not express any kind of group consensus on the issues concerned. However, we are united in our respect for the work of Karl Marx and our belief that his work will remain as important for understanding the class struggles of the future as they have been for the past. And as a group, we continue to draw inspiration from the work of Karl Marx, including his 11th thesis on Feuerbach. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. And I think today we're very fortunate in having an exemplar of this spirit in Professor Abhinav Sinha, who has returned to continue his discussion of the Varna caste system of India. His topic is the anti-caste movements in India and the need for a revolutionary class-based anti-class movement, something I think we can all identify with. So Raj, back to you.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to mute everybody and I'll do an introduction to Abhinav Sinha, and then I will unmute Abhinav Sinha, and please hold your question till the end of his talk. You could raise your hands at that time. If you have any other problem, send a comment here in the chat.
Okay, have you started recording up, Raj?
I'm sorry?
Have you started recording?
Yes, it's recording now.
Excellent.
So let me do a quick introduction for those who have not been there, and I'll keep it very brief to give Abhinav the maximum time. Abhinav has been an activist in the revolutionary movement in India since 1999, which is half his life. Therefore, you know, it's actually more than half his life, and he's pretty young. He has organized on a student and youth front as well as workers front. He writes the blog Red Polemique, has written extensively on caste system. Ambedkar, who was an icon of the Dalits back in the middle of 20th century. He has written on Hindutva fascism, Marx's capital, labor relations in India, migration, and a variety of issues. He is the author of the books Subversive Interventions and What is Fascism and How to Fight It, these two books. The third book, the first volume of his third book, is a multi-volume book on Soviet socialist transition, which will be out soon, and I want to be one of the first buyers of it. He's editor of a political newspaper of workers called Mazdoor Bigul, which means Workers' Bugle. He's also a member of the convening committee of Revolutionary Workers' Party of India. So I'm going to unmute. Actually, he's there. Everybody, let me mute everybody. I haven't muted everybody. Mute all. And then I will unmute Comrade Sinha. So, so you go ahead, unmute yourself, Abhinav. Yeah, okay. Your floor is yours.
Thank you, Comrade Raj, for this introduction. And my revolutionary regards to all the comrades who have joined. So I will just start from taking cue from where I left last time. And kind of a recap of some of the points that I made last time. That the first point was that a caste system at its point of origin was actually the embryonic class division of the latter part of the early Vedic society, the period of which ends around 1000 BC. And during that period, when the caste system came into existence as in embryonic class division of latter part of the early Vedic society, it was ritualistically and religiously ossified in the scriptures and codes of Vedic period. And that is why the relation of overlapping between caste and class came to an end. And Varna and caste assumed relative autonomy from class and developed a relationship of correspondence. It is very easy to understand because if you ritualistically fossilize or ossify the class relations of a particular period into religious codes, then these ritualistically ossified relations, they become relatively autonomous from the real class relations, because the real class relations will continue to develop with the contradiction of productive forces and production relations. While you cannot create a Bible or a Avesta Zayand or a Gita every day. So when you ritualistically ossify the production relations and class relations of a particular period into religious codes, then this ritualistically ossified relations become relatively autonomous from the real class relations. And that's what happened with the relation between class and caste. Though the Varna caste divisions came into existence as the embryonic class division of the Vedic society, they developed a relationship of relative autonomy from class relations. But still, there was a relationship of correspondence. And that is why whenever there was a major shift, a tectonic shift in the class relations, it was reflected in the caste Varna ideology and caste Varna hierarchy also. And that is why we find variations in the Varna caste hierarchy over time as well as over space. So if you look at the history of caste system from say 1500 BC up till the beginning of the Christian era, you find that many changes occur in the caste system. For example, one of the caste which was originally supposed to do the agrarian work, Vaishya caste, shifted to commercial activities and became the main merchant caste. Similarly, Shudras, who used to supply servile or slave labor before and during the Mauryan Empire, that is around 3rd century BC to 1st century BC, that Varna became the principal class of dependent peasantry in the feudal period. Feudal period starts with the Mauryan Gupta Empire in the Indian history. So these changes in the caste Varna hierarchy show precisely that it was not the Manu Smriti or any particular religious text that led to or that gave rise to the caste system. Rather, it was the caste system or Varna system which gave rise to the religious and ritualistic justifications and legitimations of caste system, class hierarchy. So that is why there was a relationship of correspondence, and that relationship of correspondence has continued till present day. So even in the Muslim period, when the Turkish invasion of India happened in the 11th century AD, the Muslim rulers did not tamper with the caste system a lot. In fact, most of the Muslim ruling class felt a kind of a jealousy towards this Hindu system of hierarchy, the caste system. And one of the conquerors who came from during the Turkish invasion, he said in the Punjab Sindh region, that was the northwestern frontier of Indian subcontinent, when he first witnessed the caste system, he said that I wish we had something like that. Because in Islam, you have the distinction only between the free man and the slave. There is no other distinction in Islam. So they could not accommodate caste system into the religious system of Islam, but socially, they accepted it and they never challenged it in a real way. The only Muslim observer who actually criticized caste system in a real way was this scientist, I'm forgetting his name.
Al-Biruni.
Al-Baruni, yes, Al-Baruni. Al-Baruni was the only Muslim observer who came to the Indians, who witnessed this very peculiar system of social oppression in the Indian subcontinent. He was the only observer who actually criticized it as being something inhuman or something unnatural. But all the other observers or representative observers of the Muslim ruling class which came from the 11th century AD, actually they have only words of praise for the caste system, that this is such an efficient system to keep the exploited and oppressed people divided among themselves and continue their rule. So, and that happened in the British period also. In fact, when colonization happened, British introduced a couple of measures which actually consolidated the caste system. The first measure was their land revenue systems, because it was the British who for the first time introduced juridical and legal private property in the Indian subcontinent, juridical and legal private property in land in the Indian subcontinent. So permanent settlement introduced by Lord Cornwallis, who was defeated in the US in the late 18th century. He was later shifted to Indian colony by the East India Company in the last decade of the second last decade of the 18th century. And in 1793, he introduced permanent settlement, which made the Brahmin landowners the juridical and legal owners of land, because before that there was only one juridical legal owner of land, and that was the King of India. But for the first time, these sub-feudatories and landlord class was declared the juridical and legal owner of land. So that was the first measure which actually consolidated the caste system, because till then the usufruct, the right to use of land, belonged to the landlord, Brahminical and upper caste people, but it was not juridically and legally codified. It was the British who for the first time legally and juridically codified the legitimate, in double quotes, legitimate ownership of the higher caste on land. And the same goes for all the land revenue settlements introduced by the British. The second step of the British colonialists, which consolidated the caste system, was the rise of the ethnographic state. Because British were basically, the British rulers, there were two major ideological tendencies among the British rulers. One was the utilitarians, influenced by Mill, of course, and the other was physiocrats, influenced by Quesnay, one of the major physiocrat thinkers. And both of them, despite their differences on the system of land revenue, they agreed on one point, that you need information to rule. Information is power. Without information about Indian colony, you can't rule it in an efficient way. So in that sense, both of them were positivists, and they had a fetish for collecting data and information. And from this very perspective, the first census of India was held in 1881. The census commissioner was H.H. Risley, and that was the first time when they counted the bodies, counted the heads in India, and categorized and classified them into castes. So for the first time, Dalits, the scheduled caste, the name given by the British, it became a juridical legal category. And that is why one of the subaltern historians, Nicholas Dirks, he says that caste is a colonial construct. Now, I believe that he goes too far, because caste existed in India before the British came, but definitely British contributed to the ossification of caste relations, the fossilization of caste relations, and whatever internal mobility was there within the caste system was almost completely shut down by the British colonial state when they came with all these measures. The first census 1887, then again the census in 1931, caste census was held, and all these definitions and juridico-legal categories were created, like scheduled caste. So once you have been registered as a scheduled caste, you are going to remain a scheduled caste forever. Scheduled caste is an administrative term for Dalits, the lowest outcasts of Indian caste system. So this kind of ethnographic ossification also happened when the British came. And in this way, they actually contributed to the consolidation of caste system. And the third way in which they consolidated the caste system is that when the British came to India, their principal ally in Indian colony were the feudal landlordist class. And that is why William Jones, who was an Orientalist, he founded this society called Oriental Society of Bengal. This Oriental Society of Bengal was founded in 1784, just when the British became a dominant power in Indian subcontinent, militarily and politically. So this Oriental Society of Bengal, what it did, it actually translated all the religious texts of Hindus as well as Muslims into English. And for that, they hired Muslim clerics and Hindu Brahmins. And so whatever the image of India that these clerical class from Islamic religion as well as Hindu religion harbored, this image was transferred to the British. And whatever the British knew about India, they knew from these class allies that they had in Indian colony. The mullahs and sheikhs and pandits and Brahmins, the upper caste of Hindus, and the ruling clerics of Islamic community. And from this process also, they actually reinforced the image of the social image of Indian society in terms of caste, which was basically the Brahminical idea, the Brahminist idea. There were a couple of ways also where the British colonialism also weakened or affected the caste system, but these were not the intentional steps of the British colonialists. One was because when the era of imperialism started, because India became a colony of the Britishers in the mercantilist period itself. But when the period of imperialism started, export of capital started into India. And instead of just buying from India and selling it to the British market, they started producing in India, investing in India. And in that process, as a derivative of that, was that a limited capitalist development happened in India. For example, urban centers developed, certain very big industrial centers developed, a sizable Indian working class developed, as well as a big mercantile Indian bourgeoisie developed, which began as a comprador agent kind of bourgeoisie in the late 19th century. But during the period of the World War I and World War II, this Indian bourgeoisie made good of the opportunity and developed its industrial base by supplying intermediate goods to British colonialists. Anyway, that is a different matter. What I'm trying to say that due to this limited capitalist development, certain registers of caste system became weakened, because capitalist development cannot tolerate hereditary labor division. It wants the labor power, in the words of Marx, to be dually free. The worker must be free to sell his labor power to any capitalist he wishes, any capitalist he wants. And that kind of legal political freedom that workers have in a capitalist system to sell their labor power to any capitalist was hindered by caste systems hereditary labor division. And that is why, with limited capitalist development, which began with colonization of India, especially in the late 19th century, it started to attack this hereditary labor division in an economic motion, not a conscious political motion. But this hereditary labor began to break, especially in the urban centers and industrial centers of India. Secondly, untouchability also began to become weakened. I won't say that it was challenged in a very big way, but it also began to be weakened in these industrial and urban centers, because in a factory system, there is a certain kind of labor division. The product is not made by one worker completely. So the product has to pass through many workers because it reaches its finished state. And a system of untouchability cannot exist within a capitalist factory system, because the same worker, the many workers have to touch the commodity in the process of production before it reaches its finished form. And that is why untouchability and hereditary labor division and commensal prejudices, they began to be weakened to a considerable extent, specifically in these urban and industrial centers. So British colonial state in the main consolidated the caste system, but it also, I would say that it unleashed certain economic forces which will eventually lead to the weakening of two registers of caste system. One is hereditary labor division and second is untouchability. And after independence, when the capitalist development was unleashed in a peculiar Indian way, because Indian bourgeoisie employed a path of capitalist development where it did not introduce radical bourgeois land reforms immediately, but employed the path employed by the Prussian bourgeoisie in the 19th century in Germany, which was called by Lenin the Prussian path of land reforms, where the feudal lords were not expropriated in a radical fashion, and the feudal landlords themselves were given the opportunity to transform themselves into capitalist kulaks and farmers, kulaks and Junkers. And that was the origin of German Junker class, the Prussian Junker class to be more precise. So that was a particular version of Prussian path of land reforms was employed by Indian bourgeoisie in India. And the second policy that Indian bourgeoisie employed was the policy of import substitution, because India became independent in a world dominated by colonial powers, colonies and imperialist powers, and it was very necessary for the Indian bourgeoisie to maintain its political independence by minimizing its economic dependence on imperialism. And in order to minimize its economic dependence on the Indian bourgeoisie employed the policy of import substitution, which was basically making all the fundamental key industries like mining, metallurgy, heavy industry, chemical industry, engineering industry under the uh, public sector. And that is why Nehru, launched this slogan of socialism. And basically, this Nehruvian socialism was nothing else but public sector, public monopoly, state monopoly capitalism. Because Indian bourgeoisie was not in a situation to lead a capitalist development on its own. So anyway, from this process, Indian capitalism developed. And as Indian capitalism developed and gathered speed, especially in the 1960s with Green Revolution and transformation of agrarian relations in the Indian agriculture, and transformation, capitalist transformation of these relations, the caste system underwent a profound metamorphosis. And this profound metamorphosis consisted in the weakening of these two registers of caste system. One is hereditary labor division, and second is untouchability. So, but the third important pillar of caste system, which is caste endogamy. Caste endogamy was not weakened by capitalist mode of production, because capitalist mode of production has nothing against caste endogamy. In fact, caste endogamy makes private property even more sacred than the bourgeoisie ever wanted to. So there was no contradiction between caste endogamy and the capitalist mode of production. And that is why the only two registers which acted as a hurdle in capitalist development got weakened after the independence in the process of capitalist development. Whereas caste endogamy did not get that much weakened after independence, because it created no real hurdle in capitalist development as such. So this is how caste system developed during the post-independence period of India. And till now, it has developed like that. So we can see the relationship of correspondence here. The basic concept of relationship of correspondence between caste and class is that whenever production relations and mode of production changes, it articulates or sublates the caste system. It takes whatever is good for the new mode of production, and it eliminates or leaves apart the elements of caste system which are not good or which have a contradictory nature to the new mode of production. And that is why even in the process of capitalist development, and when the capitalist mode of production became the dominant mode of production in Indian social formation, every social formation is always an articulation of various modes of production. But when the Indian mode of production became dominant in Indian social formation, we also witnessed certain changes in the caste system, which is weakening of two registers of caste system, which is untouchability and hereditary labor division. So this is just completing the history of caste system in a very, very short way, and which brings me to the main topic of today. That since caste system has always played the role of a system of legitimation and justification of the rule of the ruling class and the exploitation of the working poor since time immemorial. I mean, when the caste system came into existence as the embryonic class division of Vedic society up till now, the India in the neoliberal globalization age. Uh, till this whole history of caste system, it is, peppered with various attempts to challenge this caste system by the masses. So we come across the first Shudra. Shudra are the lowest Varna of the Varna system, Varna caste system. The Shudra revolt. First, we come across the evidence of first Shudra revolt since the 4th century BC. So during the period of the 16 ancient republics of India, till the period of the decline of Mauryan Empire, that is 2nd century BC, we see a series of Shudra revolt of the lower castes, revolt of the lower castes who were actually engaged in production of everything from agricultural production to artisanal production. They revolted. We come across peasant revolts in the medieval period when the Shudra peasants revolted against the feudal domination, first of the Hindu kings and then of the Muslim sultans and Shahanshahs. So there is a very rich history of revolts and rebellions of lower castes and lower classes in India. But we cannot go into the detail of revolts of lower castes in the ancient period and the medieval period because there is a restraint of time. So I would focus on the main anti-caste movement in modern Indian history. And there are many, but I will focus on the 4 representative examples of anti-caste movement. First is the anti-caste movement of Jyotiba Phule from the Western Indian province of Maharashtra. The second is the example of Periyar. Periyar belonged to Tamil Nadu, the southern portion of Indian peninsula. The third example is of Ayyankali, again from Kerala, another part of southern part of Indian peninsula, and then Ambedkar. So these anti-caste movements, they increased in the British period because due to capitalist development and modern education system, the consciousness, because even the British education system taught the students about and the education imparted by Christian missionaries. They also taught about Voltaire, Diderot, Rousseau, all the classical Enlightenment figures and French Revolution and the idea of equality, freedom, brotherhood, etc., etc. And this kind of education created a middle class in the middle caste and lower caste also to a very limited extent, but a very small intelligentsia from middle caste and lower caste, which started to raise its voices against the irrationality and oppressive character of a caste system. One of the major figures was Jyotiba Phule. He belonged to a Mali caste, not a Dalit caste, but a Shudra caste, not at the lowest rung of caste hierarchy, but yes, one of the lower castes. Jyotiba Phule belonged to that. Phule was educated in a Christian missionary school, and he was very influenced by the ideals of French Revolution and Enlightenment thinkers like especially Diderot, Rousseau. In fact, he wrote one of his famous work called Gulamgiri. It can be translated into slavery. So he wrote a book called Slavery, which is modeled after the Diderot's work Rameau's Nephew, which is basically modeled after a dialogue between the teacher and the pupil. So this Gulamgiri, written by Jyotiba Phule, is a work which is modeled after the works of Enlightenment thinkers, and where you find this old Greek style of dialogue, dialectic, where two people are engaged into debate, and through that debate, he brings out in very stark contrast, the oppressive character of caste system. And that was the brilliance and genius of Jyotiba Phule. But he still considered the British colonialists in the beginning. in the very beginning of his intellectual career, he considered the British colonialists to be liberators, because British colonialists were supposedly the carrier of enlightenment and the ideals of French Revolution, the ideals of equality, brotherhood, and freedom, and who were supposed to end this uh, politically and socially obscene system of oppression called caste system. But the British did nothing of that sort. And actually, the British allied with the oppressors in the caste system, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, the ruling castes. And for their colonial rule, they actually depended on this class of feudal landlords who were basically upper caste people. So Jyotiba Phule, towards the twilight of his intellectual career, was getting quite disenchanted and disillusioned with British colonial rule. So one of his last writings, called The Cultivator's Whipcord, it's available online, excellent writing, where he says, if you uh, look at the blood of the British colonialists, it is the same blood as shared by the Brahmins. So he's saying that the British colonialists were supposed to bring freedom, equality, and brotherhood to the Indian subcontinent. But when they came for their political uh, agenda and political motive of colonial domination, they colluded with the forces precisely responsible for all the caste oppression and domination in the Indian subcontinent. So Jyotiba Phule is starting his intellectual career from the eulogization of British colonialists, ends up criticizing the British colonialists and realizing that the British colonialists were in no sense liberators of lower caste, but actually reinforcers of the caste oppression of lower caste. So Jyotiba Phule was a brilliant mind, a great educationist, a great enlightener of Indian working masses. I'm saying working masses because he focused not simply on Dalits and Shudras. He was actually someone who was one of the initiators of first industrial organization of workers in India called Factory Mill Hands Association. Though it did not employ a strategy of confrontation with the British state, it still started. It was kind of beginning of embryonic working class consciousness in the conditions of limited capitalist development in colonial India. So in that way, Jyotiba Phule was a trailblazer, not in terms only of his social program against oppression, but also against economic exploitation. But even the greatest personalities cannot transcend the limits posed by history. So Jyotiba Phule never reached a consistent revolutionary anti-caste program, but he gives certain uh, pointers or certain beginning points for an effective anti-caste revolutionary program, which can only be a class-based program, not identitarian program. So this brings me to the second figure, which is Periyar. Periyar was, I would not be overstating if I call him the most brilliant radical militant materialist. I'm using this term militant materialist in the same vein in which Lenin and Plekhanov used this term for 19th century Russian Renaissance and Enlightenment, as exemplified by persons like Chernyshevsky, Dobrolubov, these persons who were militant materialists, atheist, uh, anti-superstition, etc. So Periyar was something like that, and quite radical in that, extremely militant materialist. And he said that the origin of caste system is the Hindu religion. So if you, and not only Hindu religion, he said any religion. Religion in itself is the root cause of all systems of social oppression. So he reduced all social oppression as a militant materialist and rationalist to the question of religion. And that was, you can say, his positive as well as his negative, because caste system is a system of social oppression which is religiously and ritualistically legitimized but it cannot be reduced to religion. I would explain this with a very simple example. You can find atheist people in India who are casteist. They don't believe in God. They are non-believers, and they don't believe in religion, of any religion. Still, they would harbor certain casteist ideas. And it is very much possible for an Indian person who is an atheist to harbor casteist ideas. So the problem with Periyar was the same problem which was shared by all militant materialists. It was non-dialectical and ahistorical. It believed in the purity of reason, but the purity of reason has a social dimension, and this social dimension is historical, to be precise. So this kind of militant materialism, it led Periyar to reduce the entire caste system, this peculiar system of social oppression, to religion, and that was his problem. So if you see the movement which he initiated, the Dravidian movement, it became a casteist movement itself, dominated by upward mobile Shudra caste, who in southern India are dominating and oppressing the Dalit castes and the Asat Shudra castes, which are equivalent to Dalit caste, the outcasts. So that was the problem of Periyar's movement. The third figure which is very important is Ayyankali. And I think for today's anti-caste movement, Ayyankali is the most important figure, because Ayyankali's movement, Ayyankali belonged to Kerala, a southern Indian state, far south of India. Ayyankali was someone who never cared for bourgeois colonial legality. He was someone who believed that it is not legality which creates action, it is action which creates legality. And this approach of Ayyankali towards a caste system was exemplified in his movement, which is popularly known as Cheliyar riots. Cheliyar riots was an event in the early 20th century when Ayyankali started to drive his bullock cart on a road which was reserved only for higher castes. Lower castes were not allowed to walk on that road. And he started to drive his bullock cart on the road with a big कॉमरेड राज फरसा को क्या कहते हैं फरसे को फरसा होता है ना
sickle
not sickle फरसा is someone which कुल्हाड़ी जैसा होता है लेकिन आगे की तरफ दोनों तरफ धार होती है फरसे में.
Oh, okay, yeah. Two-sided, yeah.
Yeah, so a weapon basically. Farsa is a weapon. So he started to drive his bullock cart on this road reserved only for higher caste as a form of rebellion, and no Brahmin dared to approach him and attack him because he had this weapon in his hand, and he invited Brahmins that if you have courage, you can come and you can stop me. But no Brahmin or upper caste had the courage to stop him. After that, a lot of Dalit people started to, violate these caste laws, and then started the Cheliyar riots. In the Cheliyar riots, there was a violent clash between the upper caste and lower caste, in which the lower caste actually defeated the upper caste, and the upper caste kind of gave in and allowed them and said that, yes, okay, you can work on this road.
Abhinav, Alan just sent me note saying that Farsa is mashati.
Yes, something very similar to mashati. So it was a weapon like that which Ayyankali was carrying. And Ayyankali led a number of movements like that, where he was not at all bothered with the legality of the colonial state or breaking the law. He said it is the law did not make the human beings. It is the human beings who made the laws. And that is why if a law is unjust, we are totally justified in breaking it. And if we have to resort to force in that process, a role of violence is there in that process, even that is totally justified. And in that sense, Ayyankali is someone, and he was not an adventurist. He actually organized masses. He organized the first union of agricultural workers in Kerala. That is a milestone in modern Indian history, the first union of agricultural workers. So he was not an adventurist or individual terrorist. He was a mass liner, a mass organizer who believed in the role of force. So Ayyankali, in that sense, despite being an idealist philosophically, he was politically a revolutionary for that period. And in that sense, he presented an anti-caste program which has relevance even today. And this brings me to the question of Ambedkar. Ambedkar is the most famous anti-caste figure because Ambedkar has been co-opted as well as smoothly accommodated by the ruling class of India as well as all the identitarians of the world, including Columbia University. All the
Comrade
identitarians in the,
can you point out
yeah,
his lifespan when he was?
yeah, Ambedkar was born in, I guess, 1896 or 95. I don't exactly remember the year. In the last decade of the 19th century, he died in 1956. So Ambedkar was younger than all these figures that I've talked till now. He was younger than Ayyankali and Periyar and Phule. So Ambedkar was the latest of all the anti-caste figures in the colonial India, the major anti-caste figures in India. The contribution of Ambedkar was that Ambedkar was someone who attained a national stature as the most educated Dalit intellectual that India had produced till that time. He was the first Dalit graduate and Dalit research scholar in India. And that is why Ambedkar holds a special place, definitely. And he played a very central role in putting caste question on the agenda of national movement of India. The anti-colonial national movement of India did address the question of caste, but in not a very notable way or a very meaningful way. It was Ambedkar's movement which forced, among other forces, it was also Ambedkar's movement which forced Indian National Congress. The other force, major force, was the Communist Party of India. Apart from the Communist Party, it was Ambedkar who was responsible for obliging the leadership of the national movement to put the question of caste oppression on the agenda of national movement. And in that sense, it was a contribution of Ambedkar. The second contribution of Ambedkar was that as the most educated man from the Dalit community, he instilled a sense of dignity among the Dalit masses. And these two important contributions of Ambedkar cannot be overlooked when we are analyzing or making a critical analysis of Ambedkar's anti-caste movement. But then we come to the political ideology of Ambedkar. Ambedkar's philosophical roots are basically Deweyan pragmatism. John Dewey, the famous American pragmatist thinker, who was a continuer of the legacy of Charles and Mary Pierce, who founded the People's Party or Popular Party of America in the last decades of 19th century and represented the petty bourgeois disenchantment in the period of monopoly capitalism. When period of monopoly capitalism started in the US, there was a strong petty bourgeois reaction to this process of monopolization in America, represented by the People's Party of America of the US, founded by Charles Pierce. I think it was founded by major ideologues of that party were Charles Pierce and Mary Pierce, who were influenced by the transcendentalism of Emerson, evolutionism of Darwin, the idealism of Hegel, British empiricism, and French positivism. So these were the major intellectual sources of this movement of American pragmatism, which reaches its apogee with John Dewey, who puts forward this pragmatic theory of instrumentalism or progressive experimentation. And Ambedkar was a student of John Dewey and Columbia University. There were other people also who were either Fabian or pragmatist, like Shotwell, Seligman, who taught Ambedkar in Columbia University. And Ambedkar was extremely influenced by these figures. And he actually accepted all the basic ideological foundations of American pragmatism, especially Deweyan pragmatism of the instrumentalist type. And what were the ideological prejudices of this pragmatism? were very clear to Ambedkar, and he accepted those ideological tenets. The first of this tenet of excuse me, the first important tenet of Deweyan pragmatism was that there can be no general theory about anything. You cannot generalize, you cannot have a general theory of anything. Everything in that sense has to be approached positivistically and empiricistically. So empiricist and positivist bias, which John Dewey took from Auguste Comte, representing the French positivism, as well as the British empiricist tradition, that was totally internalized by Ambedkar, that there can be no general theory about anything. And since there can be no general theory about anything, you cannot make a scientific prognosis about the future, about anything, about a social movement, about a political movement, about natural phenomena. So you have to do progressive experimentation. You have to make a tentative observation, and then you have to uh, make experiments constantly, but you cannot review and sum up the results of experiences of past, because you cannot have a general theory about anything. The first ideological assertion of Deweyan pragmatism was that there can be no generalization or no general theory about anything. The second important assertion of Deweyan pragmatism was that there are no leaps in the process of development of nature and society. So evolutionism, all change is gradual and incremental. There are no ruptures in the process of evolutionism. As Darwin said, that there are no leaps in nature. Nature doesn't make leaps. But later theory of evolution, as shown by various materialist evolutionists like and Marxist scientists like Stephen Jay Gould, who died a couple of years back, he showed that actually in nature there is a thing called rupture in the process of evolution of species, of flora and fauna both. So there is no incremental and gradual change which continues and ad infinitum, but the process of change is peppered with periods of leaps. And this is now scientifically proven beyond doubt that even in the process of evolution of human species, there have been ruptures. And for example, when the tail suddenly disappeared, because through mutations, changes accumulate, and then there is a leap where sudden changes occur. Everybody who has studied science knows that. But Darwin didn't knew that. And Darwin said that there are no leaps in the process of development in nature. And this was extended by pragmatism into the field of social theory. So they said even in the arena of society, all change is incremental and gradual. As you can imagine, such an assertion would lead a political theory to reformism. There cannot be no rupture. There can be no leaps. So all you can do is fight for petty reforms. The third assertion was that of Dewey was that state is the most rational actor. This assertion of Dewey was taken from Hegel. Hegel, when talked about state, especially the French state represented by French Revolution, as the reason personified. Napoleon also was reason personified. So state was the most rational actor, which is the agent of change. So change doesn't occur from below, from popular movement and mass initiatives. Change occurs from above. And these are the three main ideological assertions of Deweyan pragmatism that Ambedkar always adhered to. He always believed in them. So Ambedkar's political movement, if you look at the Mahad movement of 1927, it ended in a compromise. He never went against the state. If you look at the speech that he gave at the Mahad conference in 1927 in Mahad, he says that government is the most important institution of society, and if the lower castes want to liberate themselves, they should create an intelligentsia which can go into the government jobs, and this class of government employees from Dalit castes will act as an armor for for entire Dalit population. This hope of Ambedkar was of course dashed towards the end of his life, when he said that my own people had betrayed me, because he was the one who led the movement for reservation in the government jobs and educational institution for Dalits. And these Dalits who through reservation, became government servants and officials, they ceased to have anything with the cause of liberation of Dalits at large. And that is why Ambedkar said that my own people have betrayed me. So, what Ambedkar lacked here is class analysis. For despite all the good intentions and good intent that he had for the annihilation of caste system, he failed to understand that it is not government which is the agent of change in society, any radical change in society. It is the popular revolutionary movements who have led to tectonic shifts in the process of social change. So, due to these limitations, Ambedkar, all his strategies that he employed, Ambedkar, in the process of his fight against caste, he never transcended the boundaries of reformism, constitutionalism, and liberal bourgeois thought. And that is why Ambedkar never organized any revolutionary radical movement of Dalits as such. All the movements that he organized uh, were the movements where Ambedkar was not leading the movement. Uh, the movements were leading Ambedkar. For example, the Mahad movement or the Nashik temple entry movement. All these movements were the movements where Ambedkar very reluctantly assumed the leadership of the movement. And he, in fact, in 1931, he made it clear to one of the organizers of Nashik temple entry movement that if possible, I would like to avoid any collision with the government, any contradiction with the government. And Ambedkar was unequivocal about it, that it is the government which will deliver the lower caste from caste oppression. It is not the lower caste themselves who, through their revolutionary movements, deliver themselves from caste oppression by uniting themselves with the working class of all castes. So Ambedkar, despite making great contributions to the cause of annihilation of caste, failed to give any effective political program for the annihilation of caste, because annihilation of caste cannot happen without a revolutionary class-based program. So it cannot be based on the identity of caste. It should be based on political class as such. And this brings me to the last part of my presentation, what we need today. While learning from the positives and negatives of the anti-caste movement of all these anti-caste figures from Phule, Periyar, Ayyankali and Ambedkar, I am inclined to conclude that what we need today is a caste movement which is based not on the identity of caste, but on the class location, because class is not an identity. Class is something which is constituted and reconstituted in the process of evolution of production relation. Because there is a tendency even within certain left circle which treats caste class as just another identity, like race, caste, and nationality, and then we have class. It is, in my opinion, it is not like that, because all the identities are either they are pre-given and predetermined by the geographical or cultural or ethnic or linguistic or national location of the subject. Class is something which is not a fixed thing in that sense, and it is something which is very dynamic due to its relation to the contradiction of between production relations and productive forces. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that what we need today, and I think, I'm not sure and I won't be very authoritative about it, I would say it applies to any form of social oppression from patriarchy to racism, that we need movements against caste, we need movements against race, need movements against patriarchy, which are not identitarian. Because men don't oppress women because they are men. These identities become site of social oppression in a particular class dynamics. And if we ignore that class dynamics in which these identities become site or location of social oppression, then we are falling to the identitarian lure. And that is why women and men were already always there since the evolution of humanity on earth. But patriarchy is not something which existed from that time. Patriarchy came into existence with private property and class and state, because it is the class relations which made the gender or sex, gender and sex are not same obviously, but which made sex the location of social oppression. And similar thing holds true for caste also. I mean, Dalits are oppressed by other upper castes not because the other upper caste people are born in upper caste. It is the particular matrix of class relations in which these identities become sites of social oppression. So, in order to oppose and challenge these systems of social oppression, we need movements which are not based on identity. So, we don't need a black movement, we need an anti-racist movement open to anybody and everybody who is against racism. We need a caste against a movement against caste oppression, but a movement which is not a Dalit movement, but an anti-caste movement whose doors are open to anybody and everybody who is against caste oppression in any form. So we need a movement, not women's movement, but a movement against patriarchy, whose doors are open for anybody and everybody. Because this identitarian logic is a self-defeating logic. We are losing friends because of that. We are losing potential allies because of that. And if you talk about caste system in particular, the Dalits cannot liberate themselves with an identitarian movement, a movement based on Dalit identity, because Dalits constitute only 16% of Indian population. And if we want to end caste oppression and the oppression of Dalits, we need a class-based anti-caste movement, and this is also verified by facts. If you look at all the anti-Dalit barbaric atrocities, in 98% of the cases, the victims are Dalits who belong to the working class. Obviously, middle class and upper class Dalits also faced caste-based humiliation, but not caste-based atrocities. Caste-based atrocities are reserved only for lower class Dalits. So there is a class dimension of the caste contradiction in India also, and I am assuming that that is true for the problem of race in the US today also. So I would end here because I want comrades also to put up questions. So on this point, that in the case of every system of social oppression, which by definition is based on extra economic coercion, though it also articulates with economic exploitation, but in itself, any system of social oppression can be fought effectively only with a class-based, class-line approach. And that is where I would end. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Abhinav. Excellent. I really appreciate your talk. So what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Gene to do his middle of the program announcements and comment. And then we'll go to questions and comment period. And I have requested Comrade Alan Miller, whom you know very well, to be the moderator today. So Gene, please take it away.
Okay, well, thank you much for that talk. It music to my ears when you talk about the need for class-based analysis and class-based struggle. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about, but while people are gathering their thoughts on this topic, let me just make my usual announcements. First of all, I did put a statement on our need for funding. Since we do not get money from the Soros Foundation, we do need to draw upon the people who come to our talks. So that information is in, I put it in the chat, so you can take a look at it there as at your leisure. It's also on our webpage. And also I want to mention Coming up, we have a very interesting program next week. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the environment. I'm sure everybody's seen, or if you haven't, you should, seen Michael Moore's film, Planet of the Humans. And we're going to have some of our comrades do a review, a left perspective on climate change. And the speaker is being organized by our comrade Roger Harris. Sharat Lin will also be speaking, and Sandeep Agarwal is also among the speakers. So that's happening next week. I think it will be good. July 5th, we're going to do a reading of, it'll be the July 4th weekend. And so we'll have a reading of What to a Slave is the 4th of July, the famous speech given by Frederick Douglass on July 5th, 1852, but still very significant. So that's my comment, or my mid spiel. So I'll return it back to Alan or to Raj.
Okay, Alan, please take it, and I will monitor the time if you ask me to do, but please do the moderating.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhinav. Why don't we, when people want to, why don't we start off with questions and answers, a little bit more structured to the speaker. And at some point, we'll open it up a little bit more for general discussion where people can respond to each other. So if those who want to ask questions would raise their hands by going to the participants icon, opening up that little window, and then at the bottom it says raise hand. I can call on folks to ask their questions, or if you're on a phone, you can do *9, or you can raise your hand, and I might be able to see if your camera is on. The best way to do it is to raise your hand. So those who have questions, if you could please go ahead and raise your hand on the participants window, that would be great. Gene, you want to start it off?
Well,
we get some other
actually,
questions on?
I put my hand up, but I really have more of a comment. So maybe people...
Go right ahead. No, go right ahead. Why don't you start? Get it going.
Okay. Well, my comment is, again, I appreciate this very much, and I think it's important to look at caste systems around the world. And as I mentioned last time, not everybody's aware of the fact that that in modern Japan, which has been a modern state for over a century, there's still about 3 million people who are untouchables, who are not legally discriminated against, but are objects of discrimination. And so I picked this from my research 50 years ago. And when I went there, the outcast problem in Japan was seen as a problem for those 3 million outcasts who were living beneath the level of majority Japanese as a result of feudal discrimination. So accordingly, the solution was the government's integration policy, which attempted to integrate the outcasts into Japanese society by improving their living conditions and education and ending these discriminatory feudal ideas and practices. And this was the dominant view, not only with the government, but Liberal Democratic Party and also in academics. So when I got to Japan, I fell in with a research institute that was affiliated with the Japan Communist Party, who approached the issue from a Marxist perspective and saw the cause of the problem not in feudalism, but in Japanese capitalism itself. As a late developing imperialist nation, the Japanese class was not strong enough to carry through a bourgeois revolution on its own. So they had to use elements of feudalism to carry through their revolution. The emperor system instead of bourgeois democracy, the parasitic landlord system instead of capitalist agriculture, and the feudal status system instead of legal and social equality. And using this distinctively Japanese system, the capitalists were able to exploit and oppress not only the working class, but the entire Japanese people, and especially the outcasts. So with this framework about what's going on in Japan, the solution cannot simply be to improve the situation, to integrate the outcasts into an oppressive society. It has to be liberation, and that they call themselves the Outcast Liberation League. And they need to be liberated from all forms of oppression and exploitation. And this could only occur with a socialist revolution. So that had a big impact on me as a budding academic, and I made it one of my principles of my own politics and academic work. But I think it fits in very nicely what we were talking about today in terms of the need for a class-based approach to the problems, general problems of oppression. Even if they seem to be identity issues, we need to link that into the class issue. So again, I want to thank you very much for this talk. I found it very enlightening and inspiring. So with that, I will sign off.
Great, thank you. Any comment, Abhinav? You want to make any comment in response, or we can go on?
No, we can go on. I appreciate
Okay. Okay, why don't we have Kim and then Karen. So Kim, you're up now. You can unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been really informative. You mentioned Periyar and his rejection of religion and Hinduism. So I wanted to ask you about the Ramayana and the rejection of Rama as the hero and the replacement of Rama by Ravana as the hero.
Yeah.
And if you could talk about that a little bit, or provide the names of different versions of the Ramayana epic.
The thing is that the origin of Ramayana is basically a folklore which existed since the 1st century BC, and it was then redacted. You can say it was redacted later, and not only the main Valmiki's Ramayana was there. There were many versions which were redacted. For example, in southern India, where the Shudra kingdoms, it's in fact a very good question, and I'm thankful for Comrade Kim to ask this question, because in southern India, what we had, even in the caste hierarchy, was that even before Brahminical hegemony was consolidated there, peasant kingdoms came into existence in peninsular southern India. And that is why when the Brahminical hegemony, Brahminical civilization, to be more accurate, reached there, there were already peasant kingdoms there. And the role of Brahminical hegemony as the ideologues of ruling class was now to create a justification for these peasant kingdoms. And since in northern India, peasants belong to the Shudra Varna, the kings themselves were given the status of Shudras. But then Brahmins made a distinction between the pure Shudras and impure Shudras. And the kings were described in southern India by the Brahmins as pure Shudras. And that is why Ravan becomes a hero in the versions prevalent in the southern peninsular India, especially the far south of India and Sri Lanka. And that is why it is this difference in the storyline, as well as the main protagonist in the epic of different versions of Ramayana, different versions of this epic of Ramayana. These variations can be explained by the real social reality, the actual social reality which existed in different parts of Indian subcontinent. So there are more than 80 or 90 versions of Ramayana. There was a very good research. I'm forgetting the name of the scholar because his work was banned in India by the BJP government because it talked about uh, versions of Ramayana which don't uh, go with the Semitized idea of Hinduism. And this process of Semitization of Hinduism and emergence of a syndicate Hindu identity found a very big problem with the very fact that many versions of Ramayana are there. So I don't remember the name of any other versions right now because I studied them in my graduation almost 18 years ago. But this much I know, that many versions of Ramayana, as you correctly pointed out, were prevalent in different parts of Indian subcontinent, and the difference in the storyline and the protagonist and the structure of story was not simply due to intellectual differences in the creators of these versions. These differences actually reflected the material reality, the differences in the material reality prevalent in different parts of India. So I don't know whether this answers your question, because the question could have been answered in a much better way by someone who is into literary history of epics, but that is not my field. But this much, I guess, can incite you for further curiosities and research.
That helps. Thank you.
Kim,
Thank you, Comrade.
I think
Great.
Kim wants to follow up. Is that right? Kim wants to follow up with another thing to finish this conversation. Just want to point out to Alan that Kim's hand is up again. Or has
yeah, for some reason I can't seem to be able to unraise hands. So
Okay,
maybe
I'll
you
do
make
it.
me a co-host.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. I will do it. Okay.
Next up is Karen. You
Yeah.
want to ask your question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Comrade.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This is absolutely fascinating, and I really, really appreciate the presentation. And
Thank you,
toward the end, you talked about patriarchy in India, and I just
Yeah.
wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on the relation of caste and class to patriarchy.
Yes, Comrade. This again is a very exciting question, and it is provoking me to speak a lot, but I would try to limit myself according to the time limit. In fact,
So you
one
don't
of
have
the-
a time limit. Let me make sure that you know that you don't have a time limit. Only the
Okay,
person asking the question has.
thank you, Comrade. It's a very important question because one of the foundational aspects of caste system is patriarchy. Suvira Jaiswal is an excellent historian, Marxist historian from India, and in my opinion, she's the best as far as the history of caste system goes. She's just absolutely amazing and fascinating, and the way she writes and the way in which she supports all her arguments with concrete material research, she shows that why patriarchy is one of the constituting elements of caste system is that because one of the foundations of caste system is the practice of endogamy. If there is no endogamy, there is no caste system at all. And endogamy is the practice of caste endogamy is based precisely on on patriarchy. Without patriarchy and subjugation of women, especially after the period of with the beginning of the Iron Age in India, that is around 10th century to 7th century BC, when regular production of surplus began in the Vedic civilization, and with that class formation and patriarchy formation happened. And caste system, the very foundation of caste system, is based on subjugation of women and class formation. Because without class, there could be no labor division of that kind, which was ritualistically ossified as Varna caste system. And without patriarchy, there could be no obligatory system of caste endogamy, because for that required the subjugation of women. And that came into existence with private property, and it is very fairly documented phenomena, because you can decipher it from the hymns of Rig Ved and Atharvaveda and Samveda and the Puranic and all the ancient Hindu texts. And it can be proven also archaeologically, because there are archaeological evidence that before the formation and consolidation of class and caste divisions, women participated in leading and ruling capacity in the tribal assemblies called Vidat or Sabha. There were two names used in the Rig Vedic references for these assemblies, Vidat or Sabha. Sabha is literally means assembly. So in all these assemblies, women were there functioning in the ruling capacity. This tradition ends only with the consolidation of patriarchy, and patriarchy itself was consolidated on the foundation of emergence of private property. So these, without patriarchy, you cannot even imagine caste system. As all the anti-caste reformers and revolutionists said, that one of the basic necessities to break the caste system is making the relationship of bread and daughter. रोटी और बेटी का रिश्ता कैसे बोलेंगे कॉमरेड राज इसको? रोटी और बेटी का रिश्ता.
The relationship between basically eating with people and who you marry your daughter to, that's how it is used, isn't it?
Yeah, across caste lines. If you
across
marry,
caste line, yeah, basically.
If the marriage happens across caste lines, and if the commensal prejudices are done away with, then caste system is gone. There is nothing which remains of the caste system. So I think you have raised a very pertinent question, and that is why our program on anti-caste, I can send it to all comrades, the PDF of our anti-caste program, but the problem is that it's in Hindi. Maybe comrade, it's not very long. Maybe Comrade Raj can give a gist to all the comrades.
I can do the translation. Yes, I can do it if people have interest.
So one of the very important point in our program is fight against patriarchy. It is essential to do fight against caste. Without fight against patriarchy, there is no fight against caste.
Can I
Karen, do you have why don't you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
You had mentioned an author when you first started speaking, and I wondered if you could spell the author's name.
Suvira Jaiswal. Yes, there are two books of Suvira Jaiswal. One is Caste, Origin, Function and Dimension, and the second is The Making of Brahminical Hegemony. And the first of the book is can be pirated from Libgen, libgen.is. It is the soft copy is available there.
Thank you so much.
Send me a link to that, Comrade Abhinav, because I've been looking for those books and I can't find them. I can't buy them.
Comrade.
So if you can send it to me, yeah.
Sure, I will. I'll do it right away.
Okay, so if nobody else has a question, I want to ask a question. Anybody else wants to ask goes ahead of me.
Go ahead, Raj.
Okay, my question to you is that RSS was formed in 1925 at the same time Communist Party was formed in two different towns of India. Yeah. Under the British were still the colonial rulers. Today, RSS is the ideological parent of BJP. Yeah. And RSS has launched this reactionary program of against Muslims, and yet they also have some program to uplift the lowest caste, or apparently so, while they were originally the upper caste reactionary organization based on fascist organization in Italy. So how do you see the relationship of patriarchy, this reaction that we are seeing in the form of BJP and RSS movement that push back the affirmative action against the lower caste, which is what actually the reaction came in 1980s, when they tried to give these people better educational opportunity, what we call affirmative action in the United States. So there's a reaction formed, but yet they now have, and they have used in 2002 the Dalits as a shock troops to kill Muslims in the pogrom of Muslims in 2002 in Gujarat, the state was headed by now Prime Minister Modi. Please comment. Can you give us a little analysis of that?
Again, I think it's a very important question to understand, because the thing is that the RSS is very clever in that sense, because and this tendency has been there in the RSS politics from the period of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee himself, and the other person, what was his name? The two ideologues, Ekatma Manavad. He proposed the theory of Ekatma Manavad. Deen Dayal Upadhyay. So Deen Dayal Upadhyay was there, and they proposed this theory that in order to make the domination of Hindutva fascism complete and perfect, you have to co-opt sections of Dalits, and not only Dalits, and the most important fact is that in 2002, more than Dalits, the RSS used the tribals as shock troops to genocide the Muslims. In fact, the Chara tribe was the main tribe from which all these hired killer armies were recruited. They were paid 3,000 rupees to 4,000 rupees per month in order to run this rampage and do this genocide. So they are very much ready to accommodate tribals and Dalits within the fold of Hinduism. In fact, it is a very reactionary program, and Dalits, a portion of Dalits is also affected by that, because RSS is employing the strategy of positional warfare, to use Gramsci's word. They are using institutionalized reform work. So they have made this thing called Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram. Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram is a body which works in all the tribal areas, which are economically obviously very backward, and they are doing this, making these self-help groups of women there, teaching them how to do sewing and how to do small skills and all. And with that, they are making their, you can say, social base among the tribal masses. Similarly, among Dalits, they have something called Seva Bharti. They use this organization among workers as well as Dalits. So this Seva Bharti is also a reform organization, institutionalized reform work organization, which they use in the Dalit neighborhoods and working class neighborhoods. And they organize these Dalit people and working class people on the basis of doing some reform work. And this reform work is obviously always supported with a very intensive and very carpet bombing type ideological propaganda. So every reform activity, for example, teaching of sewing, etc., is also accompanied by a class, by a propagandist of RSS, who says that the real Muslims are enemies are Muslims. So at one point of time, they can only make one enemy figure. And this is one of the essential machinations of fascist politics. They have to construct an imaginary enemy. And in order to create an imaginary enemy, you can create only one imaginary enemy at a time. So they, in order to target the Muslims, they are trying to co-opt and win over certain portions of Dalits, tribals, and working class masses, especially lumpen proletariat, where in the neighborhoods, they are organizing these small institutionalized reform work activities and winning over certain portions of lumpen petty bourgeoisie among the Dalits and tribals, and lumpen proletariat from among the working class. And these are the people who are actually playing the role of shock troops, the SS troopers of RSS. So but what the problem with this strategy of there is one loophole, because since RSS came into existence as an organization, cadre-based fascist organization, whose one component part was Brahminism. In fact, you can trace the formation of these fascist organizations after the Lucknow Congress of the Congress Party. The Lucknow Congress happened in 1916, when Gandhi became the hegemonic leader of Congress, and he kind of fused the two streams of national movement. One stream was represented by the religious revivalist trend of Tilak, and the other was represented by the modernist trend of Gokhale. So the Brahminical lobby within the Congress was sidelined by Gandhi in a certain way, though he himself was a Sanatani Hindu and claimed to be a Sanatani Hindu, and in that sense philosophically had some elements of Brahminical ideology, but still politically speaking, not philosophically speaking, politically speaking, he sidelined the landlordist feudal Brahminical elements within the Congress after the Lucknow Congress. And due to that in 1917 was formed Hindu Mahasabha, and in 1925 was formed RSS, which, kind of absorbed all these Brahminical elements which were pushed out or pushed to the margins of Congress party. And this is why, despite all these attempts to co-opt Dalits, the anti-Dalit, Brahminist and anti-Shudra bias of BJP betrays it. So in Gujarat, you have Unakand, which BJP never planned, but it did happen in a BJP ruled state, because the BJP is a party which constantly propagates and extends Brahminical ideology. So as a political machination and strategy and tactics, they try to win over certain portions of Dalits and tribals, but their Brahminical bias and their Brahminist attitude always betrays all their strategy and tactics. And that is why a couple of years back, one of the major anti-BJP movement was started by after the two incidents which rocked Indian society. One was the institutional murder of Rohit Vemula, and the other was the Una Dalit atrocity incident. These two things kind of pushed BJP onto the back foot for a certain time period. Actually, BJP was quite defensive immediately after these incidents happened. So there is a dialectics there, in my opinion. On the one hand, the BJP wants to co-opt these certain sections of tribals and Dalits. On the other hand, its essential anti-Dalit prejudice and anti-Dalit bias betrays all its political machinations and strategies.
Thank you.
Other questions? Anybody wish to jump in, ask a question? I have a quick question to ask you. One of the things in your talk that I learned that is really surprising to me was the connection with John Dewey and American pragmatism and empiricism. And I think it's really interesting that you would give a talk, and that might be one of the first times I've heard it raised even in any of our discussions in the library. Can you comment just a bit about how you think pragmatism and empiricism can have a negative effect on a revolutionary movement theoretically, and how people might counteract that?
Yeah, I think, comrade, it's a very important question, because in India also we are seeing trends of pragmatism in the political arena. And I think there is nothing positive of pragmatism as such, because pragmatism is not simply the fetish of practice, it is the negation of the need of theory. And that is the most important part of pragmatism. There are two works written by, I think, written by American intellectuals. One is by C. Wright Mills, who was the writer of famous sociological imagination. He has written a critique of pragmatism of John Dewey. And I think the more important work is of a Trotskyite. He was a Trotskyite, and we totally disagree with him on other questions pertaining to Soviet history and role of Stalin, and etc., etc., their theory of permanent revolution, etc. But he has written an excellent work on pragmatism. It's called Marxism and Pragmatism, written by George Novak, a famous American Trotskyite. So in that work, he very pertinently points out that the main ideological prejudice of pragmatism is a complete disregard for theory, a complete disregard for science. And I'm using this term theory in the scientific sense. Theory in so far as every theory is based on scientific generalization, every scientific theory. So every kind of scientific generalization is kind of trashed at the very outset when you start with pragmatism. So Charles Peirce says that he presents a binary, which is a false binary. He says, instead of dogma, pragma, we support pragma. And this was taken up by John Dewey himself. And as if you don't believe in the fetish of mindless practice without any kind of theoretical sum up of or review, then you become dogmatic. So rather than understanding the dialectics between practice and theory, that all knowledge starts from practice, but all knowledge that starts from practice starts as a sensual knowledge, sense perception knowledge, and that must be generalized in order to build a theory which can guide our further practice, our future practice. And this is something which is completely negated by John Dewey, who says that it is not, and I'm quoting him verbatim, John Dewey, he says it is not past that creates present. It is only the actions of present which create the present. So it is the present is totally disassociated and detached from past, as if it is created at every contemporary moment by the endeavors of individuals who are active in that contemporary moment. This is a totally ahistorical theory. So whenever you get this kind of theory, we are reminded of Lenin's uh, famous imperative that without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. If you want to have a revolutionary movement, you must have a scientific generalization of the experiences of the proletarian struggles across generations, across over time and over space. So this kind of disregard for theory is extremely harmful for revolutionary praxis. Second, the link with empiricism, which you asked, is basically positivism. It is the old dictum of cogito ergo sum. What I see, whatever is true is only what I see. So Berkeley said that the material, and supposedly he was not Berkeley. Yes, Berkeley. Berkeley said that materialism is true uh, insofar as what I see is materially true. So Marx said when you were not seeing the material world still existed. It was not created by your observation. Observation doesn't create reality. So the basic argument of positivism and empiricism is that it's a solipsist argument. Solipsist means an individual takes his sense perception as the final guarantee of reality, as the final proof of reality. And Marx says that it is not the sense perception of an individual which is the final guarantee of the existence of reality. Reality exists in itself, and you are a part of reality observing the reality. So, and even before the human beings existed, the universe was there, and material reality existed. So it is not the act or action or the act of seeing that creates the reality. Reality is already there, and it's a thing in itself, to use Kantian terminology. Even if you don't see it, it exists independent of you, outside of you. And the basic prejudice of empiricism is that all truth can only be derived by experience of individuals. Whereas experience of individuals are always limited. Even in quantum mechanics, there was a debate between the Copenhagen school represented by Heisenberg and Niels Bohr and the school represented by Schrödinger and Einstein, where Bohr and Heisenberg said that it is the observer who creates the reality, whereas Schrödinger and Einstein said that reality has totally independent existence. There were deterministic problem with Einsteinian argument also, but I won't go into that right now. The thing is that empiricism is basically a fetishization, an uncritical celebration and fetishization of individual experience, whereas dialectical materialism is the review and sum up of experience of an entire class through generations. And that is where pragmatism is totally different from a scientific, not even Marxism, totally different from a scientific attitude. And that is why I think pragmatism, and then we also, if we go beyond the literal meaning of pragmatism, which comes from pragma is the act, as we know. If we go beyond that literal meaning, Devian pragmatism's basic problem was that it considered two things. One, all change is incremental. There can be no rupture or revolutionary leaps in the process of change. And that is why he was totally supporter of Fabian party. of Britain and Labour Party and Fabian Party of Britain, because they opposed the revolutionary tactics and they opposed the idea that in the process of development of nature as well as society, there are ruptures and leaps. And that is why John Dewey also supported that program of Fabian Party. In fact, the economic program of John Dewey is borrowed from the Fabian Party. Secondly, what was I going to say? Yeah, the second thing is that state is the most rational actor. That agent of change is state. It is not action from below which brings any radical revolutionary change. It is only the state which is the agent of change, which is the most rational agent in history. And this idea is taken from a totally idealist philosophy of Hegel, who said that it is the reason personified. It will lead to the culmination of journey of the idea, the demiurgos, the supreme idea, which created the universe, and etc. etc. That's a different discussion. But the point is, pragmatism is an idealist empiricism, basically, which leads, if in terms of political program, it leads to political liberalism of bourgeoisie. And that is why pragmatism is a very dangerous idea. And I'm using it in the philosophical sense, not in the everyday colloquial sense, because pragmatism is used as a synonym of being practical. Marxism is very practical, but it's not pragmatic. It's not the fetishization of the everyday short-term individualistic experience in practice.
Norma, I think, is
Thank
next.
you.
Oh, I wasn't raising my hand. I was saying about how stuff was good that he was saying.
Agreement. Are there any other questions? Sharon, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for emphasizing that part of Comrade's presentation, because I also was struck by it. And also I thank you for all of your presentation. But in particular, you know, I can't tell you the number of times I've heard from people that I was trying to, you know, bring closer to the Marxism or Marxist thought or the communist movement. I've heard people tell me, oh, I can't understand your theories. That's too abstract for me. The concept of something being too abstract is so hard for me to talk to people about. There's no such thing as too abstract. Abstractions are very important for human beings. Yes. And I would try to tell people, no, you can understand this stuff. If I learned it, you can learn it. But now I'm thinking that, you know, we start out talking, asking people to read the manifesto or read other Marxist work. I think we should start out getting people to read Dewey and talking about why he was wrong. Yes. We need to pinpoint the pragmatism that saturates at least in the United States, it completely saturates everything. When I became a teacher, I realized that what I was being asked to do was perpetuate the ruling class ideology of this country, to teach, and I teach adults, right? So even though I was teaching the English language, the content of what I was given to use in teaching English to immigrants all had to do with the ideology of the ruling class. And it's so hard to get away from that and to talk to people about how they need to think for themselves and be critical of everything they're given to in the process of becoming Americans or becoming part of this society. It's very difficult.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree.
Now Norma has...
Well, that's really interesting. When I was studying how to teach in order to get a teaching degree so I could get a job, that's about 50 some years ago, they taught Dewey, and Dewey was saying, teach by doing. And of course, the whole opposite is true of what school is for youngsters. for people new to the situation. The whole structure is an alienating structure, teaching people that in order to know anything, they have to pass through grades of school and get papers in order to verify that they've been through, diplomas and such like that, in order to indicate that they've been through the process. I say it's a process of, think about teaching a lion to sit on an entertainment device and be well behaved. Fortunately, the lion learns after a while to growl and to resist the owner's directive, and the people are out on the streets. They're becoming aware, and I think that's the place where the learning occurs. Sharon, in particular, what you were saying is that people learn because by their own experience. I was talking with DSA people. They're trying to work out what their behavior should be and so forth. I said, ask them if they really like the 8-hour day and other kinds of things that control their lives, and see from there if the idea of whatever it is that's brought you together with them, it can be expanded to the communist theory. Here's Marx saying that capitalism is constructed this way, and here is the communist theory saying people should be able to live lives that feel good to do and that are good for themselves and their neighbors and earth. Start at the beginning, and then perhaps the ideas that are expressed or that are examined in the philosophers, which I always eschewed until I got to Marx very short few years ago, that the philosophies of how life should be arranged are completely understandable. Thank you, by the way. This is lovely.
Thank you, Con.
Okay, I'm going to wait my turn. Others should get a chance first. So I do want to raise another question, but I'll let others go first.
Gary?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
Moderator here. Please, I'm not trying to.
Hi, Con.
Hi, Abhinav.
Hi,
Abhinav, thanks a lot for the talk, man. It's just great. And I love your stuff about Berkeley, whose town I live in is named after this fool. They named the university after him here.
Yes.
And then the other thing is that he was very much the centerpiece of Lenin's materialism and imperial criticism.
Yes, exactly.
Because of this whole thing around solipsism and how somehow it got linked up with the new turn of the century discoveries in physics and stuff like that. And and you had a whole bunch of Bolsheviks who were physicists who somehow took these notions that Berkeley wrote and stated that because of these new developments in physics, that our whole understanding of class and dialectics and class struggle and everything else was passé, and basically we needed to come up from underground and become legal.
Yes. The observist philosophers,
Yeah. And, and of course, Lenin was sitting up in Paris trying to run a party school, and he had to take 8 to 10 months out of his schedule to address this stupidity.
Yes, exactly. I'm so glad to hear, to be reminded of that. One of the most exciting and interesting episodes in Lenin's intellectual history, and also the political history of Bolshevik Party, the fight against the left tendency of Orthovist, represented by Bogdanov and Lunacharsky and the like. Thank you, comrade, for reminding me that.
And then finally, it was Pulitzer, the French communist philosopher.
Pardon me?
Pulitzer, George Pulitzer.
Yeah.
Who was murdered by the Nazis because of his role in the resistance, who addressed solipsism simply by saying, let all those folks who really feel this way step out in front of a trolley and come back and tell us what happened when the trolley disappeared.
Exactly.
That's all. Also, I left a note on the group chat for you to take a look.
Yes, sure.
I'll go after whoever has not spoken, but I'd like to ask a question when I get a chance.
Go ahead, Raj.
Okay. So I've left India more than 50 years ago, and I only get a glimpse of it every year or 2 years when I go back, and for about 3 weeks. And most of the times I've spent that time near the family out of necessity. Once in a while, I do get other connections. But my impression from all this, and most of it is observing mostly middle class, but also working people, because you travel and you see them, is that women have changed in these last 50 years. There's a tremendous amount of change happening in women. And the Dalits have made some impact on the political system. And yet, both are being co-opted, a very good portion of it, in the bourgeois ideology. And so, for example, the women's liberation has been largely co-opted by the bourgeois idea of men are bad, and therefore women need to separate or do whatever. Or they compete in the boardrooms, etc., the glass ceiling and all that. And the Dalit thing is not as visible to me, but the emergence of leaders like Mayawati in the biggest state as chief minister and being showered with all these gifts and putting up big icon, big statues of their icons, in Lucknow, in my hometown. So, from the point of view of the class, the struggle against both patriarchy, which you say is crucial, again, if caste is to be overthrown, and so both patriarchy and in this caste, what is the gain made by the working class women and the Dalits? So a little bit of idea of the movement of these sections. I would appreciate your response on
that. Yes, I think the most important point of access to understand this complex situation is the fact that the Dalits as well as the women are highly class differentiated entities in India. They are not homogeneous or monolithic in any sense. So there is a tendency in the middle class, which is there in the middle class and the upper middle class, especially among Dalits as well as women, to drift towards the identitarian line or identity politics of some kind, because Mayawati also represents an identity, a kind of identity politics, which is active in the electoral arena. Then there are strains of identity politics which are not electoral. For example, World Social Forum was very active in India a couple of years ago. World Social Forum was funded by the French government and the Brazilian government and a very big French bank, basically to promote all kinds of identity politics, all kinds of uncritical celebration and fetishization of identities vis-a-vis class. And class was condemned as something reductionist, something oppressive, something to be given, to be abandoned. So there is a natural class tendency among the upper middle class and middle class Dalits as well as women to be inclined towards the strains of different kinds of identity politics. But then there is also movements of working women in India, which are also focusing on the social oppression of women, and they are also fighting against the oppression of women from upper caste in a militant way, not in a reformist way. And there is also a working class Dalit movement, which is fighting not only against the super exploitation of Dalit workers, but it is also fighting against the ideological uh, onslaught of Brahminical ideology against all Dalits, including Mayavati. For example, a class-based uh, anti-caste movement will also fight against a BJP leader who makes very derogatory remarks against Mayavati being a daughter of a chamar. And not because Mayavati is a representative of ruling class, because when you fight against these derogatory remarks made by a BJP's MP against Mayavati, you are not basically defending the class position of Mayavati, you are only attacking the Brahminical ideology. For example, someone who believes in Trump in India makes a very misogynistic comment against Hillary Clinton, who is a totally neocon instrument of American ruling class, Hillary Clinton. One of the tasks of class-based anti-patriarchy movement is also to condemn and fight against this mentality and this ideology, which demeans women, which makes women uh, uh, inferior to men in any sense. In that, the American anti-patriarchy movement will not be defending Hillary Clinton as the representative of the neocon imperialist US bourgeoisie. It will be attacking the misogynistic patriarchal ideas which have roots in the pores of the US society. So there are some gains in the class-based anti-caste movements done, which has participation from the Dalits as well as non-Dalit masses. And also in case of movement against patriarchy, there are organizations of women workers who are fighting against all forms of patriarchal oppression, which target even the middle class and upper class women. In fact, the movement against patriarchy originated with working class. International Working Women's Day was actually International Working Women's Day originally. Then it was recognized by the entire socialist bloc on the proposal of Clara Zetkin to be celebrated as International Women's Day. And later, even the capitalist bourgeois world kind of co-opted it. Now the Archie's prints cards on International Women's Day, that is the biggest travesty of the working class origins of Women's Day. So I think the gains made by working class women and Dalits are very significant. And the harm done by middle class petty bourgeois identitarian movement among the Dalits and women has caused a lot of harm, not only to the working women and working Dalits, but in general to women and Dalits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We still have time. So I think Mr. Beekman hand was raised, right? Beekman or Miss, what, I don't know who that is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, comrade.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Thank you, thank you. Blair, it's him and his, I guess.
Okay. So.
He and him. I just wanted to thank you for the lecture. There was a lecture like this about a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago. It was very interesting, and you know, I raised my hand by accident. I meant to be signed into the chat, and I wanted to leave a quick note in the chat. But just to thank you for this series, and yeah, I'll be very interested in it. I have a problem in that I'm into in this subject in learning it from a, more of how the caste system itself works and putting it into perspective of a Marxist perspective is helpful for me and how I can understand things. And thank you for the references to Japan today. And I guess to conclude, I was going to write in the chat really quickly. I need to do this more often, is to remind people that East Bay Community Energy, their local community energy program, or the local community energy program of Berkeley, of East Bay, is, they need help and support in what can be real positive, sustainable ideas of local community energy. And I just wanted to put the word out to everyone to really check it out and try to get involved in good practices if there can be, because these are our next few years. We can really help determine what could be our good next few years. And the board people of the ECB, they're good, like the mayor of Berkeley, Dan Kalb, I think. And, but, they need that extra help from the community. And if we give them that good communication, good language, and good, important ideas, I think it can really push them over into understanding and working towards good concepts. So,
we have another question from Karen, maybe the last one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Karen? Karen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but I'm curious about the relationship of caste and the discrimination against lower caste and the discrimination against Muslims. And also the fact that some Dalits have actually converted to Islam in order to escape their the way that they are trapped in the untouchable class. And also sort of who the natural allies would be. Is there any kind of alliance between Muslims and lower castes? And is there an alliance between the Sudras and the Dalits? And on the ground, what kind of anti-caste working class movements are actually going on?
Yeah, thank you, Comrade. It's a very important question, because there are tendencies in the left movement in India which talk about an aggregative equation. I call it aggregative equationalism, who say that since Muslims are oppressed, Dalits are oppressed, tribals are oppressed, women are oppressed, so the revolutionary front will be Muslims plus Dalits plus tribals plus Shudras plus women. The problem with this argument is that all these communities, all these identities are highly class differentiated. First point is that in any fight against caste, the upper class Dalits, even the upper class Dalits, are not going to participate in a radical, consistently democratic and revolutionary fashion. Even the Shudras, the upper class Shudras, because today in India, the main oppressor, the principal oppressors of Dalits are not Brahmins, but they are Shudras. Because Shudra castes are mainly, they constitute the rich peasantry of India. The upward mobile rich tenant peasantry of India is basically the Shudra castes. So the Shudras today are not oppressed in the sense in which they were oppressed in the ancient period and the medieval period. Shudras today constitute the main force of the Indian rich, you can say, rural bourgeoisie. The Indian rural bourgeoisie, one major component of Indian rural bourgeoisie is the Shudra caste, and they are the principal. They are, in fact, most of the anti-Dalit atrocities are committed by Jats, Gujars, all these castes which are basically Shudra castes. They are not upper castes. they belong to the Shudra Varna. And ritualistically, we don't obviously believe in these hierarchies, but ritualistically speaking, according to the Brahmins and Brahminical ideology, Shudras are the main principal oppressors of Dalits. Same goes for Muslims, because even in Indian Muslims, you have Dalits. There are Dalit Muslims. For example, we talk about Kameen Zatis. Kameen Zatis means the lower castes among Muslims. So when the Muslims came to India, caste system also percolated into the ranks of Muslim population, because it was such an efficient system of keeping the oppressed divided that even the Muslim rulers, not religiously and philosophically, but socially, they accepted it. And who are these lower castes among Muslims? Those who converted, those Dalits who converted into Islam. So when the Dalits converted into Islam, they created a Dalit community even among the Islamic community, among the Indian Muslims. So the problem is that one has, that's why hence the conclusion that it is the class approach which will lead us to establish and consolidate a revolutionary unity of the working class and the working masses among Dalits, among Shudras, among Muslims, and among women. This is not class reductionism, because as I said, these lower class or working class movement among Dalits will also oppose all forms of anti-Dalit atrocities. Even if the victims are middle class or upper class Dalits, it will fight against it. It would have been class reductionist had it claimed that we will fight against caste atrocities only when it happens against working class Dalits. That is not the slogan of a class-based anti-caste movement. The class-based anti-caste movement says that we will oppose casteism and Brahmanism in all of its forms, even if the victim belongs to an upper class or a victim belongs to an elite class. That doesn't matter. That's why I gave the example of Hillary Clinton. If Hillary Clinton is if someone attacks her and says that she's not a capable and efficient politician because she's a woman, a class-based anti-patriarchy movement will attack that kind of ideology and that kind of person who makes such a statement. So the problem with making an aggregative unity of all these identities is that these identities are not homogeneous and monolithic. And the caste system has infiltrated into the ranks of Muslim population in India also. So one has to look at the potential allies from a class perspective, because even if we depart from some good intentions that all Muslims or all Dalits will become an ally in the movement against communalism or religious fundamentalism or against casteism, one will be in for big unpleasant surprises.
Okay, so I think we're out of time. Thank you, Abhinav, and thank you, Alan, for moderating the discussion. I just wanted to comment that even a Muslim minister is in BJP government, at least one, maybe more than one. And so, which will surprise you because it's anti-Muslim base. They still co-opt one Muslim leader who very enthusiastically defends them. These are the contradictions. So Abhinav, this was very, very educational, informative presentation and addressing the issues. And we hope that you come back based on your other books in future. And I certainly want to get Subira Jaiswal's PDF thing. I'm happy to
send it.
But I just like to get both her writings since you've talked so much about it. So thank you very much.
Comrade, before we
end,
can I make a small announcement?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that there is a worker comrade of ours who has been diagnosed an year back with duodenal cancer. It's a very rare kind of pancreatic cancer. He has been recently operated in Tata Cancer Institute in Mumbai. And because he belongs to our party, he's a professional whole-timer working class comrade. And we are there is no backing, family backing, economic backing, and we are trying to mobilize resources for his treatment. He's fighting for his life right now in Tata Cancer Hospital. I'll send an appeal which we are sending to all comrades abroad in Australia and Canada to Comrade Raj, and if Comrade Raj could extend it to other comrades, and whoever can make a contribution for the treatment of this very precious, very important comrade of ours from working class would be highly appreciated.
We'll do it right away as soon as you send. Definitely.
Will you put up an address or a location, a way to contact you over this?
Yes, we will send you the method of making the contribution as well as the address of our institution, of our organization.
There's no list that belongs to this meeting. So Raj is going to have to be in charge of contacting whoever will be contacted about this request. It'll be through, I guess, through Raj.
Yeah, I can remember all the people who were in today and send it out to them. I think somewhere there is a participants list generated in this also. I don't know.
Well, you don't have it though. It closes out when the when we all leave the meeting, and I
know that I will not forget most people, but it's possible a couple of people I may not.
Well, maybe Jean will help you.
Well, let me just say that if you look, the participant list, you can see it on the screen, and you do a screen capture of that list, which will give all the names, but not the emails.
How do you do a screen capture? How do you do a screen capture?
On a Mac,
I think the whole conversation has been recorded, so one can just look at the recorded video and see who has participated.
It doesn't include the participants and all.
It doesn't do that, yeah.
We will work on this.
Okay, yeah. All right, comrade, we will. Thank you very much, and we'll definitely do that, what you asked us to do.
Thank you, comrade. Very obliged.
Don't forget next week,
Planet of the Humans. Gene, go ahead.
Next week, don't forget Planet of the Humans, and you can watch it at planetofthehumans.com for free. So we'll see you all next week.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. Okay. Good night to you, Abhinav.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, comrade. Good day to everybody.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.